Welcome to the New Europe studios, where you can watch us make the news. Today I'm speaking with Artur Benedyktowicz from Caritas Europa. They've just conducted a study into the unemployment and the effects of austerity in 7 European countries, and he's here to talk about this report. Could you first tell me why this report was commissioned from you?
First of all, we as a Caritas organizations are helping on the daily basis people suffering poverty and unemployment. We observe in our daily work that the crisis is not over, and we want to document the outcomes of the crisis and the impact of austerity on the daily life of many Europeans. And it was the main reason to show to the broader audience that not only the European statistics but also the experience of our organizations can prove that the crisis is not over, although in some countries you can see some signs of growing GDP or some signs of unemployment slightly decreasing.
I think most people who are watching this will recognize a truth in that the economic crisis is not over. Some of the figures and some of the statistics may be beginning to look better, but in most people's lives the situation hasn't really improved much. That's backed up by your finding.
Exactly. The countries which we have chosen for this report are 7 countries. 4 out of the 7 are receiving assistance under something which is called troika programs, and this assistance is conditioned by very strong austerity conditions or provisions that this country have to follow in order to receive the support. And we are trying to show that these austerity measures are not delivering something good or something that may change the reality in these countries. We do not have the GDP increasing in Greece, although it's already 4 years when we have the austerity programs implemented there. We have growing unemployment in this country, we have growing unemployment in Cyprus, as well as we do not have a positive impacts of troika programs in any of the countries that received support from the troika.
Well, coming from Brussels in Europe, the headquarters of the European Union, there has been increasing criticism of the austerity measures and a growing understanding that they just haven't been working. How bad are things still out there for ordinary people?
As I mentioned, we have a lot of evidence showing that poverty is increasing, and especially that those who are paying for the crisis are not those who caused the crisis. We have the situation in Cyprus, in Greece, also in Ireland, when those people who used to be poor are getting poorer, while those who used to be rich are getting richer. And this is something that needs to be addressed, and this is something showing the limits in implementing austerity programs. There is no point in fighting crisis in closing the hospitals, in decreasing minimum wages, in cutting the pensions, because in the long-term result, it will increase poverty and it will sometimes destroy the social situation in these countries.
I mean, one of the things that has been happening is with people still facing harsh times, and some of these are actually going to be here for a very long time. And when we look at the imposition of austerity on several countries, including European countries having prime ministers and governments imposed on them, the question has to be asked here: is the troika democratic, and is it democratically accountable? Have you got any findings on that?
Definitely, there are a lot of questions. A lot of questions have been raised around troika democracy and the troika legitimacy. We are questioning the right of troika to imposing some of the budgetary cuts, which are especially which make vulnerable group exposed to further poverty and unemployment. We are saying that the troika should be somehow, the troika programs should be somehow assessed by democratic representation of the European societies. This might happen, for example, through really public debate about the troika programs, to really introducing decisions about the troika programs within the normal legislative system that is applied at the EU level or at the national level. we also think that troika should be better monitored by European Council and by the Council. So far, the situation is that the ECOFIN ministers approved the request of the country which is applying for financial assistance, but there is no very well follow-up in terms of what this financial assistance is bringing, what are its outcomes. So we are thinking that the Council should also get more involved in monitoring of the impact of the troika programs.
Okay, I mean, one of the weird things about the political scene in Brussels is people are quite used to being a little bit elusive and things like that. And one of the things is, I get the sense in many of the institutions that they're a bit embarrassed about the troika and they don't particularly want to discuss it, and it's all, well, that was then, we're moving away from that now.
But I must say there is a light in the tunnel. We noted that already in January last year, so in 2013, there were first statements of previous IMF workers, staff, as well as of IMF contesting the austerity in Latvia. Latvia was the first country who got this type of program early in 2007 or 2008, and this program in Latvia introduced a lot of cuts in public pensions, which had an impact on the situation of pensioners and of vulnerable groups. And even IMF in 2013 said that maybe these restrictions, this austerity imposed by IMF program went too far. And recently, this month even, European Parliament adopted 2 reports questioning troika performance, saying that something like social monitoring of the impact of troika programs should be mandatory, should be introduced and should be applied. And European Parliament also requested the European Commission to make a very concrete report about the outcomes, social outcomes and social impact of the troika programs. So we see that at least at the European level, the discussion about troika performance, troika legitimacy is starting. And through this report we also want to contribute to this discussion. We want to say that we observe the impact of the troika program in our daily service to millions of people across Europe, and we have a right to also to contest this performance of the troika programs.
Well, I think many people would argue that these unfortunate set of circumstances that we've gone through has shown the value of the European Parliament, because it is the Parliament that's trying to hold the troika to account much more so than the Commission or the Council. Is that your analysis?
I think we are still somehow put within the frames of European legislation and the mandate of different European institutions to act. And we must understand that these institutions are operating in this certain frameworks and they have certain limits. Definitely in the future, such financial assistance programs, as long as they address the issues related with social area, with unemployment, with daily life of Europeans, should be somehow assessed, should be somehow monitored through normal, civilized procedure here in Brussels. I think the Commission and the European Parliament should continue on that and should come up with some proposals how to ensure it. But the crucial thing which we are saying in our report is that any austerity, any ideas that are proposed in troika programs, even now, should be mandatory assessed against their social impact. They should not simply be focused on creating GDP growth. No, they should also be assessed against what impact it may have on the daily life of Europeans, especially of those who are from the vulnerable groups.
Well, I mean, one of the sad rules of the modern world is that the poor always suffer the most. And as you say, it's not the poor that broke the world banking system. But you're also bringing up another feature which is really disheartening for a union that once preached social Europe, and that is that of the working poor. The people who are working often 2 jobs and are not making enough to get by.
Yes, this is the trend which we observe in the last 5 years. Around 10% of there is a 10% rate of working poor in Europe. It does mean that possessing the job does not prevent any more people from becoming poor. What we observe also in daily work of Caritas organizations, that we have more and more people who ask for help in Caritas centers, but these people in the same time they have a job. So there are not these traditional groups of unemployed, homeless people asking for Caritas support. No, there are also people who have a job, but the income from the job is not enough for them to provide food for their families, to have a decent life. And this is the growing problem. And we are highlighting this also in the context of supporting young people. There's huge youth unemployment in Europe. But the question is, if we are not at risk, that we will offer something which is called active labor market measures to young people, like training, like apprenticeship, like temporary employment, like on-the-job training, which do not provide them sufficient income. So they will continue to suffer lack of perspectives. They will continue to suffer low income, but in the meantime, from the statistical point of view, they will not be unemployed. And this is the risk. That's why we are highlighting in our report that European Commission should put higher focus on creating decent jobs. Not whatever job, but decent jobs. So whenever youth guarantee is promoted, the monitoring of youth guarantee should try to track the labor situation of young people. Once they receive the training, what this training brought to them, whether they managed to get a job, whether this job was a long-term job. And we would like to avoid a situation that more and more in many companies across Europe, the traineeships are replacing normal jobs. So people are delivering traditional type of work, but they are not paid for that. They simply are considered as trainees.
Yeah. So they're doing the same job for less money and with even fewer benefits.
Of course.
And that is not a way to run a continent in the long term, is it?
No, this was nothing that was in the roots of something which is called European social model. Decent jobs and sufficient income from work is one of the principles of European social models, and I think we should prevent it, and we should somehow say stop to applying too much flexibility, too much short-term working arrangements, too many short-term working arrangements and other solutions which really result in growing working poor.
But as we're seeing that the policies is moving away from austerity and people are now preaching growth, however they intend to achieve that. Do you feel optimistic about the future? Do you think that these policy turns are going to carry on and be real and a more social Europe can come out of this crisis?
Honestly speaking, I have some doubts, because if Europe is now desperately looking for economic growth, same as it is looking for decreasing unemployment. But if we have a look on some evidence from other countries, we can say that sometimes very fast economic growth follows increasing discrepancies in the society. While in the countries which have a constant but slower economic growth, you have lower discrepancies in the society. The question is, what is Europe looking for? A long-term constant growth, or on a very fast track of economic growth? A fast economic growth is really something we would like to have indeed, but it may have consequences in terms of groups of society which will not benefit out of this growth. So this is the question which is more crucial. And coming back to our report, we have doubts if the measures which are proposed to some countries when they ask, for example, to cut the budget for health expenditures, to cut the budget for long-term care, will really bring something in the future in terms of European living in the decent environment, European benefiting the social models. If you make a cuts on education, it will have the impact in next 30 years. If you make cuts in healthcare system, it will also increase immediate but also long-term impact. One example is Greece. In Greece, the birth rate is decreasing over the last years, while in the meantime, Europe is desperately looking for addressing its demographic problems. So and of course, not so many young people are deciding to have families in the situation when all this social protection system is being collapsed, and when they do not see the future for them to create a family which can have a decent life.
And I think this is a problem that all Europeans are thinking is it's harder to have a decent life now than it used to be. It's harder to have this because of all these social cuts. And I suppose all we can hope for now is that we do have a moment where things are beginning to turn. And this is also when the European Union is beginning to think about reform. We're getting a new parliament, a new commission, a new council head. So the potential for changing is right here, right now. Is this going to be grasped?
This is the question. We think that engagement of all, we call it stakeholders, but of all institutions, both here in Brussels and at the national level, the engagement of governments, engagement of regional authorities, engagement of civil society, which I'm representing, are needed to tackle efficiently and to stop growing crisis and poverty in Europe. I think the evidence is already that something must be changed. There is a reason to change the current policies, and as we are saying on the cover of our report, there is a time to look for alternatives, and these alternatives should be applied. So we are very much looking forward for the outcomes of the elections, not in terms of political outcomes, but in terms of really having people somehow committed to change the reality in Europe, and we hope for best.
So it's good to see that even after studying the worst of what's happening in Europe and the worst effects of some of what is called the worst policies that we put in place, that you still retain some hope and some optimism in Europe and of course in Europeans.
Yeah, it's true.
So there you go. Even in the darkest times, there are people working on how to make things better. We're at a moment of change. Whether we change or not is going to be hard to see. But anyone watching this can be part of the change simply by voting in the European elections. It's the best chance we've got. Thank you.